Mahatma Gandhi once said that an eye for an eye makes the world blind. Many people in the interpretation of the same came and said, if you break my leg and I break your leg, then we will not walk because we have two crippled people in the same house. When we look at our world today, we live in a deeply wounded world, a world that is torn by bitterness, a world that is bleeding, a world that is broken by resentment. And I know each and every one of us in this church this morning, either we have nursed, or we are nursing, or we will nurse some wound in our lives that have been inflicted. Could be by people who are very close to us, people we expected not even to think of hurting our lives. And that's why today, God is calling upon us to arise and heal the world. And the only way to heal the world is to choose forgiveness and the mercy of God, because forgiveness and mercy of God is the only thing that can heal the world. We can make our world different. We can make our life different. We can change the story of our lives when we choose to prioritize mercy over vengeance in our lives. And that is why today, Sunday, God is calling upon us to choose mercy over vengeance, because mercy is divine. Vengeance is not only human but evil, because it destroys our very own self. When we talk of forgiveness, and by the way, this is one of the words that do not have a concrete definition in the English dictionary or any other dictionary. When you go to the dictionary, they will tell you forgiveness is forgiving somebody who has wronged you, because forgiveness is very divine. And when we look at the forgiveness, the following thoughts come into our focus, which I want to share with all of us this morning. One, forgiveness as communion of the life of God. That it is the nature of God to forgive, and anytime we forgive one another, we are actually participating in the very life of God. And that participation in the very life of God brings a lot of graces, power, and blessing in our lives. The second thing about forgiveness is a proclamation of faith. When we forgive, we tell the world we can think differently, and we can also act differently, and we can also live differently. Because one thing about Christ that can never be taken away from him is his mercy that was nailed on the cross. Every time we look at Jesus on the cross, we see the proclamation of the forgiveness of God in our lives. When we look at the gospel today, it is telling us forgiveness is the repayment of the debt of God. That we all owe God something. And you know, we are alive because God has forgiven us. If all of us were to be punished for every sin we have committed, there will be nobody in this world, because humanity is by its very self vulnerable. Humanity is by its very self a wounded race. And that's why we are alive, and the things we have today and what we have done today has come because God chose to forgive us. That's why anytime we choose to forgive, we are actually paying. We are actually paying God the debt that we owe him. And you know, when we pay God what we owe him, God multiplies and brings it back to us. God has no reason for what we give him, but he multiplies and brings it back to us. And that's why today God is telling us, every time we choose forgiveness, you are paying God what God has given you. And when you give God back what he has given you, he multiplies and does very many things. That's why in the world today, the strong people are those who take time to say, I am sorry. But the strongest people are those who take time to say, I forgive. And this is something we must look at even at the family level. Most of the things in the family or in our society could be solved by those two things. I am sorry, I have forgiven you. And I really pray that we understand that in our lives. Because these days, we live in a world of very strong people. And I always tell people, even for marriage to work, one of you must be weak. Marriage is not for two strong people. When you are two strong people, you will fight a fighter. At the end of the day, you are fought. Nothing is happening. But it means that's why the essence of marriage is compromise. The ability to know that this is my position, but because of marriage and because of my vow, I am giving it out. I don't have to be right all the time. Even when I'm right, I don't have to be right for the sake of the higher good. But these days, this is steering us because we forget that we owe God something. You are looking at somebody else's mistake, but your mistake is also there. You are looking at somebody else's weakness, and your weakness is also there. You are looking at somebody else's challenges, and your challenges are also there. And I've always said this. A weakness can make a witness. A weakness can make a witness. Can you tell the person next to you? A weakness can make a witness. Weakness makes witnesses. If you see anybody who has done well in the world today, that person was not born the way they are. If they are rich, most likely that they came from very poor families. If they have done the best, could be they came from very low background. If they have something to celebrate about their lives, it is because of the wounds and the things they have incurred in their lives. And that's why this Sunday, God is calling upon each and every one of us not to give up in the face of weakness, and not to give up when we are broken by the weakness of other people, but to arise and choose forgiveness so that we may become witnesses. That this thing happened to me, but I overcome it. That is what a witness is. And finally, forgiveness is a celebration of love. The highest way and the best way to say I love you is to say I forgive you. And if you have ever told somebody I love you and you meant it, you should not be shy to tell that person at their worst, I forgive you. You know, these days, sometimes when you look at how people talk, one of the things that has been really defected in our society today is love. Because love these days is like many things. Sometimes it's like the wallet. Sometimes it is like what is being cooked. And these days you see people's moods go according to the bundles. You find husbands who are very happy. Kagweno papani. That time he has time to play with kids and do all the things. Lakini kama ni omena, dutugi mama ukuchocho, okadwa milro. You find ladies who are very happy with you. Even what happens, that day you can do the worst thing in life. You can go drink yourself silly. You can do very many things. But if she has sensed that the wallet is good, hey honey, no problem, I love you. She's not telling you, I love you like your wallet. That is why even these days, wasumbinio pongopin. Wasumbinio pongopin. And I think I've told you, msumba ni mtu ambaye anasumbuka na pia anasumbua watu. Hiyo ndio msumba. Mtu ambaye anasumbuka na pia anasumbua watu. You are of age, unasumbuka. You don't have where to eat. Seje moko, ichieme kate liel kate rafari ni setieko kamano. And when you go back home, your mom has cooked. Mami, kuna kitu imebaki. But why is marriage a challenge in our society today? Because mercy has become a challenge. And when young people see broken families, they get scared. When young people see how father and mother lives in this house, they become scared. When young people see what people do in the name of I love you, they get scared. That is why today we can only heal the world when we discover that forgiveness is a celebration of love. And if there is somebody you truly love in your life, you should not be afraid to tell them, I forgive you. Because when you tell them, I forgive you, you are taking them from their worst to their best. And at their worst, you cannot be at your best. At their best, you cannot be at your worst, knowing very well that our life affects other people's lives. You cannot be happy in a family when your wife is sad. She will make sure you are also as sad as her. Okinyal were laro, kawuon nyithindo timangoa, kawuon nyithindo iyowa. Hey, ungeni seche moko kaka wadak. We live in a way where people celebrate other people's challenges. Could be wuon nyithindo kaendi gik moko chando. Kato gimoro dhi otimorene. Kori yudo ka chiegno mi nyithindo mor. Nyasaye ber. Nyasaye ber to ngato no utho wuon nyithindo. He was seriously uthoed. The uthora has been uthoed. It doesn't work like that. That's why today, forgiveness is one of the ways of saying I love you. Yesterday when I was making my walk up the mountain, I asked myself, what would forgiveness mean to us today? And I came up with one answer. Forgiveness is letting go to let God. Anytime you let go, you let God. Forgiveness is inviting God into the wounds of our lives so that God may heal those wounds. And when we let God, there are following things that happen in our lives. When we let God, we let power. When we forgive, we become more powerful. Even in this country, if you look at celebrated leaders, names not withheld, they forgave much. That's why forgiveness is being powerful. And not only being powerful in the world, is receiving the power of God to accomplish our tasks, because many times our enemies would want to wound our lives. And they will really celebrate when we are down. And when you choose to forgive, you gain power over them. Yesterday in the evening mass, I was sharing with the people who came. But you see, the nature of God is different. There are times God will not take the enemy away. He will leave the enemy but embarrass him in his presence by blessing you. And this is why is something we must know. Forgiveness brings power of God in our lives. The second thing that forgiveness brings, to let God is to let grace. Anytime we choose to forgive, we open our life to other possibilities. When we revenge, we are only thinking of what hurt us. But when we choose to forgive, you are opening your life to other possibilities. And that's why today God is telling us, forgiveness, to let God is to let peace. Let us let peace in our lives. Let us let grace in our lives, because sometimes it troubles us and we are not peaceful. Another thing about letting God in our lives is to let victory. There are wars in our lives that we can only fight and win when we forgive. Because they say every war we fight, whether we win or lose it, it takes some power from our lives. That is why sometimes we become very weak. After fighting, whether you have won that fight, whether you have lost that fight, you are broken. Something is not right in your life. And that's why today God is telling us, there are things if you want to win in our lives, we must choose to forgive. Forgiveness, to let God, is to let growth. Something that is holding us behind, we must let God and we will grow. We will grow. But when we refuse or when we revenge, we still remain at that level. That's why today God is telling us, letting God is letting growth. Letting God is letting blessings. And letting God in our lives is letting healing. That's why when we look at forgiveness, in my own conceptualization, which I think may not be very bad, we see and we receive the 7 fruits of forgiveness: power, grace, peace, victory, growth, blessings, and healing. Look at how those things are very beautiful. Just imagine you have even 2 or 3 of them. That's why we pray today that God may give us the grace to forgive. And when we talk about forgiveness, it does not mean we are assuming what has happened to our lives. And that is where sometimes we go wrong. It also doesn't mean that it is letting go immediately. That you have hurt somebody and let us now greet each other, it has gone. No. What forgiveness is not ignoring the pain and injury, but it is surrendering it to God so that God may deal with it. Because God is specialized at dealing with what we cannot deal with. God is specialized at doing what we cannot do. And this is something that we must understand in our lives. That is why the best way to express our forgiveness is prayer. And Jesus taught us on the cross, prayer is one of the ways of letting go what people have done in our lives. You know, on the cross, Jesus did not assume that he was just crucified, but he prayed for them. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. In other words, forgiveness is taking what has hurt our lives. It is taking our problems. It is taking our pain to the cross. And that is very important. When we take our pain to the cross, they become glorified. Every story that is taken to the cross becomes the glory of God, however much damage that story may be. And that's why today God is telling each and every one of us, forgiveness is taking it to the cross. Not ignoring that somebody has hurt you. Not ignoring that there is no problem. You know, one of the problems with our society today is indifferent to real challenges. Like now, people are suffering in many ways. But there could be a clique of people even in the government where there is no problem. You know, life is becoming difficult every single moment. And we must be very cognizant of this even as Christians. These days, even in this church, if you look, sometimes it's very hard to find somebody with signs and symptoms. In fact, these days, for you to baptize a child, you have really waited and waited a waiter. Because people are afraid. People are quarreling in families. You look at husband's wife eyes here. Some husbands have very red eyes this morning because they were quarreled the whole night. You look at the eyes of some ladies here. Some ladies are just tired. At 7 o'clock, they are very tired. They are very tired. They are even asking, how am I going to live in that home? Why? Because we always ignore where the problem is. And today God is telling us, forgiveness is acknowledging the problem and taking that problem to God. And telling the person who made the problem that their life, their well-being is bigger than their mistake. And that is something that we need to actually to understand in life. When you forgive somebody, you tell that person, you have made a mistake, yes, but your life is bigger than your mistake. You are weak, but your life is bigger than your weakness. You have done something, but what you have done is not as big as your destiny. That's why today we pray in a very special way that God may grant us the grace to forgive. I finish by saying, today is a day to begin a journey. If somebody has really hurt you, you have nursed that thing for life. Some of them even from childhood. God is telling you, begin that journey. Don't be afraid. He will complete it. How do we begin that journey? Start praying for that person. Start praying for that wound. Even if you say one prayer, God will take over. And that's why God is inviting each and every one of us to begin that journey. What journey are you beginning today? You have somebody in your life that you need to begin a journey for today. Could be they never wished you well. They wanted you dead. They have done all these things to you. They don't even care how you feel. They are just there. Begin that journey. Begin that journey. The journey is very simple. Go to the cross and God will walk with you through it and you will receive the healing mercies of God. And this is something that we actually need. And that's why there is one saying I always like, that grace is when we receive good things we do not deserve. But mercy is when God spares us from the bad things we deserve. Grace and mercy define our lives. And that's why the second reading, St. Paul is very particular. He's telling us, live for Christ. Don't live for human beings. They will hurt you. Die for Christ. Don't die for somebody else. You know, sometimes when we have a lot of anger within ourselves, when we want to revenge, when we have resentment, we are actually killing ourselves on behalf of other people. That's why somebody said that anger or vengeance is taking poison and expecting somebody else to die. And many of us have that poison within us. How can so and so do this? God is saying it is true. He's not ignoring, but he's saying begin a journey. Begin a journey of reconciliation. Begin a journey. And how do you begin that journey? Pray for it. Life is so dear. Don't die for somebody. Life is so precious. Don't leave it for somebody. I know we have all gone to funerals. And one of the things that will tell you how important or non-important your life is a funeral. You have lived with your wife for all these years. She is standing to say, Father Goniero kamano kumbiro konya iko ngatni. And depending on how sadaka marari onodhi, koneno kanodi odhi mang'eny kochacha. An kawuona onge gi wach, akwayo mana wenda mondo chop maber. To mowe ka onge gimoro, mane madwa dengo. Itimonwa kama nango, and she means it. She really means it. Even when you go to mortuaries around here, you find the mourning is different. The one around district is different because benyithindo yewang. Idako de town all these years. To chiengno oban nyaka kom nyaka mattress manuninde odhigo dala okeno bro duogo Kisumo tichadi. To jo Aga Khan tukute tenderesa. Menyithindo rwaka ngolo koro oywe mana matin kamae. Ikia kato ywa kata oko ywagi. That's why today nobody is important in your life. God is most important. Live your life for God. Nobody deserves your death. Die for God and live for God. Kawuono wakwa Nyasaye mondo miwateko nika wangima kata watho to watho e lwet Nyasaye. Nyasaye kawuono kwerowa geno kuom dhano nikech dhano nyalo hinyo ngimawa. To kawuono bende Nyasaye nyisowa ni kawahinyore ngima to wadhi e msalap Jesus mondo Jesus omiwa teko mar chango kuom gik mosetimorenwa. Mane momiyo kawuono Jesus luongo wa ng'ato ka ng'ato kuomwa mane misani mondo wakwa Nyasaye mondo miwa nema mar ng'uono. Ng'uono ok en gima ikelo e ngimani iwuon. Nyasaye nyaka mi nema mondo ing'uon ne ng'ato. Nikech kit dhano chalo le. Ka ng'ato timoni marach, in bende idwa timone marach. Omiyo kawuono walem mondo Nyasaye omiwa nema mar weyo ne jowetewa. Kaka somo mokwongo nyisowa ni ka wadwaro mondo Nyasaye owinj lembwa, to nyaka wang'uon nikech ich wang' kata sigu diyo lemo, sigu diyo hawi, sigu diyo tekowa, sigu kelo adhola e ngimawa. Mano momiyo Yesu bende nyisowa ni nyaka wang'uon nikech ng'uono en gop Nyasaye. Sasa mwang'uono wachulo Nyasaye gope nikech ang'owa. Wan bende wajoketho, onge ng'ama ok oketho. Mane momiyo kawuono wakwa Nyasaye ne mane? Mondo bi kendo bed kodwa.